Brian Kelly updated injuries to 3 LSU starters. You'll hear the latest. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Glad to have you aboard with us here. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts. So thanks for making us your first listen. And of course, you can watch us on YouTube as well. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Ultimate GM. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, LOCKEDONCFB, inside the game store to receive a free boost to begin your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. Is LSU the most overrated team in the SEC heading into 2024? One national writer thinks so, and I'll tell you who that is and why. He might not be wrong. I don't agree, but he's got a point. We'll get to that. Lincoln Riley met with reporters on Wednesday out in SoCal and talked about his defensive improvement, very similar to what LSU is going through, so we'll get there as well. But the story here locally is that Brian Kelly put LSU through a workout on Wednesday. Media was invited to attend. Full disclosure, it was one I was not able to attend, unfortunately. I had meetings all morning on Wednesday, so I was not able to attend practice. There were a couple of things that came through, and then Brian Kelly met with reporters after practice, which I want to delve into some of the things that he said. Of note, Miles Frasier, starting right guard, was seen in a boot, and he was replaced by Tyree Adams as the starting right guard. And I think that's really consequential because Tyree Adams we've seen primarily as LSU's second-team left tackle. And he's good. Second-year player out of St. Augustine. He has flashed. If you followed us here, I've told you about the one-on-one pass rushing drills and how he has had some really nice moments throughout this fall camp. And you can tell that guy is going to be a really good player and is probably going to be your starting left tackle next year, barring something unforeseen. But when Miles Frasier goes out, we've seen Bo Bordelon running at the number 2 right guard. So when Miles Frasier goes out, the fact that it's not Bordelon, that it's Tyree Adams that goes in, tells you Brad Davis's approach is, let me get my best 6 on the field, my best 5 on the field. So my 6th guy is clearly Tyree Adams. Whether it's tackle or guard, he's the next guy that goes in. So it'll be really interesting to see if or when that happens. It's almost unfathomable to assume that at that position on the offensive line, you'll go a full 12-game regular season schedule without any types of nicks or bumps or bruises on the interior of your offensive line. So you got to have depth. Your first 5 you feel really good about. We've started to see here in this last week what it looks like. Cohen Eccles is your backup center. Garrett Dellinger is an emergency center. Clearly, Tyree Adams is your 6th lineman. So if one of your guards or tackles goes down, Tyree Adams is the next man up. So just something to file away. We'll get to the BK injury report here in a second. But another player that was absent was Sage Ryan. And it was J.K. Johnson who replaced Sage Ryan. Remember, we've seen not only throughout spring and throughout fall camp, a lot of different alignments. And J.K. Johnson and P.J. Woodland, we've seen run with the ones at various times. Last week told you when LSU went to a nickel package, which is, of course, 5 defensive backs, they took Ashton Stamps off the field and put J.K. Johnson in, and then Jair Brown has been your first-team nickel all throughout camp. So you're starting to get a sense. And listen, Brian Kelly told us on Saturday, and we played this clip for you earlier in the week, that, they're going to use a lot of players defensively. And so if you're seeing guys on the 2 deep that are getting run with the first team, like, you're going to see those guys play on Saturdays. They're just not dominant personnel-wise, so they're going to have to utilize depth. And so you're seeing a lot of different looks, a lot of different formations, a lot of different personnel groupings. And that would sort of tell you that, J.K. Johnson, should something happen to Sage Ryan or Ashton Stamps, J.K. Johnson is the next up at cornerback. So we're continuing to see a lot of this and a lot of these questions be answered. For what it's worth, West Weeks also was not available at practice, and he was replaced by Devon Keys, a freshman. So, as we continue to make our way here to the end of camp, and with next week, game week beginning, these are the types of personnel decisions that are key and important, because these are the types of personnel decisions that are going to affect who you see in the game against USC. What if if an offensive lineman's having trouble blocking or goes down? What if a cornerback is having trouble on the outside? Who goes in? Well, we're starting to get those answers very clearly now that you are into game week. Remember, Brian Kelly told us they began USC prep on Tuesday. So they are working on USC now as if this were like an open date schedule. And then next week, of course, is game week. So yes, it absolutely matters who you are seeing right now. Should also note that Brian Kelly told us we will not be able to see practice on Saturday. It was originally in the camp notes of the media availability that the media would be able to see practice Saturday in Tiger Stadium. They changed that on this week's schedule. I'm disappointed, but I understand it. I mean, if you are trying to work on your game plan for USC and there are things that you don't want people to see, I get it. You can be most effective by not having us there. Okay. I'm very grateful for the access we've had up until this point. So just as a point of procedure there, we will not have a practice report for you Saturday because the media is not invited to attend. Now, after practice, where we saw all of this unfold, by the way, some plays of note. Mason Taylor had a one-handed touchdown grab over Harold Perkins, said to be the play of the day. Garrett Nussmeier did throw an interception, not his fault. However, CJ Daniels dropped the ball, and off the deflection, it was intercepted. So a lot of kind of what we've seen so far throughout camp continues to play out here in these final days of camp as LSU heads toward game week. Now, Brian Kelly did, in fact, talk about injuries. So I mentioned right there, Sage Ryan, West Weeks, Miles Frasier, and then Chris Hilton was the other player who was absent, or I should say not participating on Wednesday. And Brian Kelly gave an update on all four of those players.
I think we've got a grade 1 hamstring. I think we've got a foot sprain. These are injuries that should clear up this week and have them back full go for preparation for USC. I think we've got an ankle with Miles Frasier. Let's see who else we have. I think those were the three. Hilton's got a bone bruise, but one that we feel like he should be back this weekend as well. So I think 3 or 4 guys that kind of the bumps and bruises of camp, but we feel good about their availability come this weekend.
The bumps and bruises of camp, but all guys that Brian Kelly expects to be there practicing on Saturday as LSU gets closer to the opener against USC. Speaking of that opener against USC, USC had a practice in Lincoln Riley on Wednesday, met with reporters and talked about the defensive improvement. And you are going to be, I think you might be as fascinated as I was hearing Lincoln Riley talk about his defensive improvement, because it almost feels like you could just do the blind test with LSU and USC. And this is going to illustrate that as well. We'll get to it next here on Locked on LSU, your team every day. Yeah, it's a funny name, but there is nothing funny about the offer when we tell you about Ibata. Listen, we all buy stuff. Whether we buy online, whether we go into stores, doesn't matter what it is. And Ibata is a free app. It's a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn hundreds of items hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies. You can earn hundreds too, even toys. So make sure you're beating inflation this summer and into the fall. The average Ibata user earns $256 per year. Told you, hundreds. So that could cover an entire shopping trip. That could cover a flight to a road game this year, the fancy dinner you've been craving, maybe tickets to one of the really big games on the schedule. And all you got to do is download Ibata. Right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibata by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. That's LOCKEDONCollege. So go to the App Store or Google Play, download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word. That's Ibata. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store. And be sure to use the code LOCKEDONCollege for Ibata. I'm going to get to what Lincoln Riley said here in just a quick second as he met with reporters. But, of course, love telling you about our friends over at Locked On College Football, because college football is back and it's not too late to catch up before the season kicks off. SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12. You can get it all from Locked On's stable of college experts by subscribing to the Locked On College Football podcast. Who has a chance to make it to the playoff? What teams will cause chaos in their new conference? Everything you need to know, all in one place. Be sure to follow and subscribe the Locked On College Football podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Lincoln Riley met with reporters as USC was on the practice field on Wednesday. And one of the giant question marks about SC, obviously, is their defense. Similar to LSU. Remember, LSU was 108th in the country last year in total defense. USC was 119th. They fired their defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch, just like LSU fired Matt House. They brought in Deanne Lynn from UCLA, overhauled their new defensive staff. They have a ton of transfers on the defensive side of the ball as well. So it's been an awful lot of turnover there for Lincoln Riley and that defense. And Lincoln Riley was actually asked the question of comparing where they are defensively now to where they were a year ago. And he kind of scoffed and said he didn't like doing the comparison game, but he did offer this.
There's just a lot of it that's different. What we're doing, how we're doing. I do think it's been impressive how our coaches have kind of meshed together, and then how our players have been able to pick up our scheme, kind of take to that coaching. I watch us, and I don't feel like I'm watching a group that's only been doing this for a few months together. That's been a pretty consistent feeling really ever since we hit the field with this group of coaches and in this particular scheme, is you feel a comfort level and a confidence about our guys within that scheme. So it's got to go show up on Saturdays here pretty quick. But I think just more the overall feeling of the group certainly feels different, and obviously we'll go let the results speak for themselves.
If I had put a voice scrambler, so it sounded like one of those, you know what I'm talking about, like one of those calls when they're trying to hide someone's voice. I couldn't tell that was Lincoln Riley. And I said, listen to that coach and tell me, is that Brian Kelly or Lincoln Riley? Could you have honestly told, based on the content of that answer, who it was? That's the challenge here. There's Lincoln Riley saying, our energy is different. Our energy is good. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? That's Lincoln Riley saying, man, with all these new coaches, new players, it's impressive how quickly they've gelled and meshed together. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? LSU remade its entire defensive staff. Yeah, like these two teams are going through almost the exact same thing. So however you as an LSU fan feel today about the way we've been talking about the defense, eliminating mistakes, playing with more energy, SC is feeling the exact same way. And by the way, LSU and LSU's offense has a challenge in the same way that USC does, and I'll explain, but you don't really know what USC is defensively. By the way, 10 of the 11 projected starters for USC are transfers, and 5 of them are in their first year at USC. And I also mentioned a new defensive coordinator, and they've overhauled the entire defensive staff. So it is effectively an entirely different defense. Like the difference with LSU is, yes, LSU went into the portal, and they got Gio Paez, and they got Jair Brown, and there are players that are first-year portal players that are going to contribute. Jordan Gilbert is another one that's going to start. And I can even look back at Braden Swinson or West Weeks or Parrish Shand as guys that came to LSU as transfer players that are going to play a lot this year. But I can also look at that defense and go, there's a lot of homegrown talent there. Savion Jones has been at LSU his entire career. Jacobian Guillory has been at LSU his entire career. Harold Perkins, Whit Weeks, Greg Penn. We've talked about Sage Ryan, Jordan Allen. Ashton Stamps. There's a lot of contributors and starters that have been here their whole career. That is one difference that sort of maybe is a feather in LSU's cap. But Brian Kelly was asked, like, how do you, as an LSU offense, prepare for a USC defense when you don't really know what they are and who they are?
Yeah, it's hard to tell because there's so many transfers. You know, you really we look at a lot of UCLA tape to get structure, right, in terms of understanding the structure of the defense. And then, you know, because there's so many transfers, it's really hard. We break them down individually by player and do a deep dive on each one of them as players. And, you know, obviously a lot of individually talented players, but like anything else, they got to play together as a unit. So what we've done is we've relied heavily on the unit that played together at UCLA and expect that they're going to play in a similar fashion. And then obviously know the talents that, you know, a lot of these guys bring as individuals.
Sounds very familiar. By the way, you remember how, if you've been here with us on Locked On, I shared with you, I mean, just I can't get over the similarities. They're just uncanny. I know we talked about it yesterday with Miller Moss and Garrett Nussmeier. I mean, both are 6'2", 200 pounds. Both are fourth-year players. Both were 4-stars. Both sat behind Heisman winners. Both started the bowl game last year, which was the first start of their career. Both threw for over 300 yards in the bowl game. I mean, it's uncanny, the similarities between these two teams. But remember, earlier in camp, Joe Sloan made a comment where he said about the defense, you know, it's competitive. They win a rep, we win a rep. Brian Kelly talked about how we need consistency. You know, the defense, they'll win a day in a series. The offense will win a day in a series. Listen to how Lincoln Riley, again, like if I just white labeled these two teams, like just scrubbed, if I did a transcription of this interview or just did a blind resume where I scrubbed the name, the team, the jersey colors, voices, all that stuff, and all you got to see was the data, you might think they're identical. Listen to what Lincoln Riley said.
That's kind of how this whole camp has been. It's like it's not even really one team dominates a day very often. It's kind of this period and that period, and then this period it's back and forth. And so it has been very competitive. I think you feel on the field the size difference in this team. You feel kind of the physicality, the battle at the line of scrimmage absolutely feels different. And I think anytime we get on the field together in a team or like scrimmage scenarios.
You win a rep, they win a period, we win a period, it's back and forth. Even these camps have played out similarly. I don't know if you've noticed, but the point spread for the game has dropped. It dropped on Wednesday dramatically. At one point, LSU was a touchdown favorite. It dropped all the way down to 4. A lot of sharp money came in on USC, which plunged that number. We'll see if it goes back up. What it goes to tell you is it's a virtual pick 'em. There's a lot of uncertainty with both of these teams right now. And you know, I know there's a lot of people high on LSU, and I get it. You're an LSU fan, and you should be. There's a lot of talent on that team. You could have 3 first-round picks on the team. I think we're all high on Garrett Nussmeier. But one of the things you might remember me saying this, I hope you remember me saying this. I had one big thesis on this defense, about a week and a half into camp. And I told you, if you're with it, if not, go back and watch the episode. You can see it. I said the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. See, we can watch these individual periods, and LSU's receivers keep dusting the defensive backs, and the defensive linemen, keep struggling to get wins against this elite offensive line because there's nobody in the defense that's as good as Will Campbell. There's nobody in that secondary that's as good as Kyron Lacey. It's just how it goes when you're having these one-on-ones. But when they go in the team periods, we continue to see the defense elevate. And I told you my theory, my takeaway is the whole of the LSU defense is greater than the sum of the parts. Individually, they're not going to win a lot of one-on-ones, but when the 11 come together, they've actually been pretty good. Well, listen to what Brian Kelly said, exactly how he said it on Wednesday.
The sum of this team will be greater than any one of its parts. I think it's going to be a unit that You think Brian Kelly listens to Locked On LSU? I'll play the full clip, but Brian Kelly essentially used the exact same phrasing that I did. He did kind of mess up the saying a little bit. It's the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, but he essentially said the exact same thing. Maybe he does listen. The sum of this team will be greater than any one of its parts. I think it's going to be a unit that a lot of guys are going to be integral in its success. I mean, we're going to play 5 or 6 defensive tackles. We're going to play, 5 defensive ends. We're going to play 4 or 5 linebackers. There's going to be a lot of guys that are going to be part of this. So, look, we all can pull out the Harold Perkinses and, the Will Campbells and the Garrett Nussmeyers and, Karen Lacey's, but I think there's more players that are going to enter into the mix than we had last year.
Getting close. LSU and USC. At least one national college football writer thinks LSU is the most overrated team in the SEC. Talk about who that is and why you might have a point next. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. All right, Locked on LSU fans. I want to take a quick minute here. Give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love. It's Ultimate College Football HC. It's Ultimate College Football Head Coach. This is an amazing game, y'all. And the simulation lets you step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. I mean, can you imagine being the head coach of the LSU Tigers? You get to recruit the players. You get to hire the coaching staff. You get to oversee the training camp. You get to handle school scholarships. You control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Can you handle the pressure? Well, here's what I really love about the game. You're also responsible for calling the offensive plays during the games. So your strategy determines the success of your football season, but it also shapes the legacy of your program. It's Ultimate College Football HC. It's completely free. It has no ads. It is 100% playable offline. So you can play on the go as you want, when you want, where you want. Of course, we got a special offer for Locked on LSU fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That's all caps inside the game store. Receive a free boost to your program when you start. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it'll get your team off to a strong start. So download the game, visit ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com, or just look it up in the app stores. It's Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. So as we come down the stretch here, and I'm not huge on lists, but I saw this today, and the only reason I thought I would bring it up here is because I think it might actually have some merit. CBS Sports ran through a list of superlatives and the biggest questions for the SEC as we are approaching the start of the season. And one of the questions it asked all of its writers was, who's the most overrated team in the SEC? And Shihan Jayaraha, who writes for CBS Sports, I'll take your word for it, said that LSU is the most overrated team in the SEC. And I'll read what Shihan said. The Tigers lost their top passer, top 2 rushers, top 2 receivers, and offensive coordinator from a team that finished outside of the top 10 last season. Defensive coordinator Blake Baker will help improve the defense, but flipping play callers on both sides of the ball and relying on a host of unproven options to take on starring roles makes it difficult to see LSU seriously landing in the college football playoff discussion like a preseason number 13 ranking might assume. A road slate featuring Texas A&M, Florida, and Arkansas could also present some unexpected landmines. I wonder if we did a blind resume, how we would view LSU. Like, I think of this sometimes. If I went back and listened now, but just full disclosure, I did pick LSU to go to the playoff last year and to win the national championship because I thought that offense was going to be awesome. I didn't think they were going to be the number 1 offense in the country, but I thought they were going to be awesome. I saw enough to know that teams were going to have a real challenge stopping them, in large part because I watched them absolutely eviscerate the LSU defense all throughout fall camp. What I didn't anticipate was the LSU defense being quite literally the worst defense in LSU history. But my point is, I'm no homer. I'll tell you what I think. And that's why I look at this and I go, how did I miss so badly on the 2023 defense? And maybe I gave them the benefit of the doubt because they hit on all those transfers, all those defensive back transfers in 2022. They hit on Greg Brooks and Joe Fouché and Mekhi Gardner and Jark Bernard Converse. They hit on all those guys. And a year later, they just missed on all of them. And of course, Matt House, who put together a very competent defense in 2022, saw the whole house of cards come tumbling down in 2023. So I missed badly. I mean, I think back and I go, could I have foreseen the offense in 2019? I'm not sure anybody saw Joe Burrow throwing for 5,000 yards and 60 touchdowns. But Joe Burrow was at SEC Media Days that year and said he thought that team was going to average 40 points a game. And a lot of people laughed and scoffed. Now, I thought they could be a 10-win team, build on the Fiesta Bowl from the year before, but I didn't see the greatest team in the history of college football. So maybe I am a little too conservative, in an effort not to be so one-sided, maybe in an effort to be more toward the middle, I go too far the other way. I don't know. But I do look at it and say, if we looked at a team and said, all right, they're losing a Heisman winning quarterback, 2 first-round picks at receiver, your offensive coordinator that was a Broyles finalist, your defense was the worst defense in the history of the program, you fired the defensive coordinator, replaced the whole staff, and you got a bunch of new starters as well. Oh, by the way, you play in the SEC, and you got to play Bama and Ole Miss. You're playing a neutral site game against Southern Cal. You got to play on the road at A&M, at Florida, at Arkansas. Oklahoma rotates on the schedule. There's a lot of reason to think that team is going to struggle. Now, I happen to think the offense is going to be very good. I also think the defense is going to be much better than they were a year ago. I don't think they're going to be elite because I don't think they have enough elite players to be an elite defense. I think they'll be a good defense, a solid defense, but not an elite defense. And I also happen to think that the schedule breaks in LSU's favor. I think getting an open date before Ole Miss when they have to travel back-to-back weeks is a plus. Getting your open date before Bama and getting that game in Baton Rouge is a plus. Getting Vandy rotating on the schedule is a plus. Getting Vandy the week before Oklahoma comes to Baton Rouge is a plus. Getting Oklahoma in Baton Rouge is a plus. Going to Gainesville in a year where Florida might fire their coach and you may have an interim by the time LSU plays there is a plus. So there's a lot of reasons also to be bullish on LSU. I don't think this is a championship team. I don't think they're a championship contender. I think, the ceiling for this LSU team is probably a 10-2 record where you sneak into the back of the playoff with the right tiebreakers and you travel in a first-round game and probably lose it. I think that's probably the ceiling for this team. But you wonder what the floor is. Like, if Garrett Nussmeier isn't capable enough to be a consistent starter, if that defense hasn't improved as much as we thought they might, if teams like Texas A&M or Florida are better than maybe we think they are, and you have to go play those games on the road. Remember, Florida's a road game after you play Alabama. That's always a tricky spot. So there's reason for skepticism as well. So where are you? Glass half full, words, or glass half empty? For what it's worth, ESPN did put out bowl projections from Mark Schlabach and Kyle Bonagura. Schlabach has LSU playing in the Texas Bowl against Kansas. Bonagura has LSU playing Washington in the Las Vegas Bowl, starting and finishing its season in Sin City. Well, if LSU gets a win to open the season out in Vegas a week from Sunday, the arrow very clearly pointing up for the Tigers. But that point spread's coming down. So we'll keep following it as we get closer. Hey, thanks so much for being here today. Thanks for making Locked On LSU your first listen today and every day. Now go check out Locked On College Football. From NIL deals to the never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't even need to search for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, thanks so much for being here. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and be sure to let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day. For Locked On LSU, your team every day.